Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we will cover which is a more appropriate strategy, going through cycles of bulking and cutting, or simply aiming to build muscle while approximately maintaining body weight. First, we need to define what exactly these two different strategies are. Essentially, these are both nutritional strategies, not different training approaches. So for the sake of this video, whenever comparing the two, we will assume all training variables are equated. So the first strategy, going through cycles of bulking and cutting, is when we go through intentional phases of gaining weight followed by losing weight. We may dedicate a few months up to multiple years in a calorie surplus, and then a few subsequent months to lose the excess body fat that was gained during the bulk. This theoretically would leave us with more muscle mass and at a similar or leaner body fat compared with when we started. Then each subsequent cycle of bulking and cutting would yield greater and greater muscle growth and less body fat over time. The other strategy is the approach often referred to as gaintaining. This is where trainees essentially try to maintain their current body weight and simply focus on building muscle while maintaining the same approximate body fat. For the sake of this video, we will also consider minor changes in body weight or very slow changes in body weight over time as a gaintaining approach too. To answer which of these strategies is most appropriate for lifters, the first question we need to answer is, do we need to be in a calorie surplus for muscle growth to occur? The answer to this is no. It is not mandatory to be in a surplus for muscle growth to occur. It is possible for trainees to build muscle at maintenance calories and even during a deficit. This is seen often in the research that resistance training interventions without intentionally prescribing a calorie surplus still allow trainees to make hypertrophy gains even in experienced lifters. For example, this study found that trainees were able to make hypertrophy gains while around maintenance calories. The intention of the study is not important in this case. The main findings we should look at are changes in body composition. As we can see, in both of these training groups, total body weight was essentially unchanged from the start to the end of the study. However, the subjects in both groups saw small increases in fat-free mass, indicating that muscle growth was able to occur whilst at roughly maintenance calories. This is one example of many studies which find that eating at maintenance calories or even in a deficit can still result in muscle growth through resistance training. However, the next question we need to answer is, does eating in a surplus result in superior muscle growth compared with maintenance or deficit calories? Unfortunately, we don't really have any studies directly assessing this, but we do have some indirect evidence which we can draw conclusions from. In this study, one group intentionally entered a calorie surplus through an increase in protein intake, while another attempted to eat at maintenance calories. As we can see, the high protein group definitely increased total calorie intake, with the control group eating closer to maintenance calories. After 8 weeks of resistance training, both groups increased fat-free mass, but as we can see, the group eating in an intentional surplus saw slightly greater gains than the control group. So from these studies, we can see that a surplus is not mandatory to induce muscle growth, although a surplus does seem to promote superior muscle growth compared with maintenance calories or a deficit. Furthermore, we probably don't really need to look at the research on whether a surplus is more hypertrophic than maintenance or deficit calories when we consider the anecdotal evidence that is present. Almost every bodybuilder or physique athlete, natural or enhanced, intentionally enters a consistent calorie surplus in their off-season to maximize muscle growth. And these athletes are some of the most muscular and lean humans on the planet. The next question to consider is how much of a surplus is required to maximize muscle growth. Luckily, we do have some direct evidence on this topic to establish some general recommendations. First, this study explored the effects of two different rates of weight gain in athletes performing a resistance training program. As we can see in the white bars, the faster rate of weight gain resulted in a greater increase in total body weight and slightly greater muscle growth compared with a slower rate of weight gain. However, fat mass increased more than 5 times the amount compared with the slower weight gain group. Another study compared the effects of a larger versus a smaller surplus on body composition changes in bodybuilders. Similar to the previous study, it was found that muscle mass increased more in the more aggressive surplus, but body fat also increased disproportionately. These studies together suggest that eating in a larger surplus seems to promote slightly greater muscle growth compared with a smaller surplus, but also results in far greater fat gain too. For this reason, this research review concluded that a more conservative surplus of around 10 to 20% increase in maintenance calories is probably more appropriate for most serious lifters. This is because a more aggressive surplus will likely result in far greater fat gain, which can precipitate greater muscle loss when dieting back down to lean levels. So it is pretty clear that significant muscle growth can occur without a calorie surplus, but a surplus is likely required to maximize our rate of muscle growth. However, is the opposite true for fat loss? Do we need to be in a calorie deficit for fat loss to occur? The answer here is much more straightforward. A calorie deficit is required for significant fat loss. While we do often see a simultaneous increase in muscle mass and a decrease in body fat at maintenance, the magnitude of fat loss is insignificant. When aiming to lose body fat, we often want to lose multiple kilograms of excess fat. So for this to occur at maintenance, we would need to gain multiple kilograms of muscle mass. This is simply not realistic to occur in a reasonably short time frame for the majority of drug-free lifters. Therefore, our best option is to enter a calorie deficit while simultaneously aiming to preserve or even increase muscle mass, so that the weight lost comes exclusively from fat and not from muscle tissue. This can be achieved by continuing to perform resistance training with the aim to provide the most hypertrophic stimulus possible. This also begs the question, how much of a deficit should we be in? Should we aim to lose weight at a faster or a slower rate? Well, luckily, we also have direct research on this topic. This study compared the effects of losing weight at a faster versus a slower rate on body composition changes while performing regular resistance training. One group lost weight at around 0.7% of body weight per week, while another group lost weight at around 1.4% of body weight per week. Both groups lost the same total amount of weight, but the slow group did it over a longer time frame, while the faster group did it over a shorter time frame. Although both groups lost the same total amount of weight, the slow weight loss group lost more fat mass and actually increased lean mass slightly, while the faster weight loss group lost a little bit of muscle mass throughout the diet. This suggests that a slower rate of weight loss may promote greater muscle retention or even allow some muscle growth during a diet compared with a more aggressive deficit. However, like the rate of weight gain discussion, there is an inherent trade-off that is made. A slower rate of weight loss may mean that we preserve more muscle mass. However, a faster rate of weight loss means that we may sacrifice some muscle tissue, but it also allows us to re-enter maintenance calories or a surplus sooner, which will allow us to regain the lost muscle back or even gain more muscle mass. I would generally advise a more conservative deficit for most trainees, as it allows more flexibility in their everyday life, although each person can lose weight at their own preferred rate. So this whole discussion about being in a surplus or deficit brings up a relevant topic, which is body recomposition. Recomposition is the idea of building muscle and losing body fat at the same time. Usually this refers to trainees gaining muscle mass at maintenance or during a deficit. We know that recomposition can and does occur even in fairly experienced lifters. This research review explored the prevalence and determining factors of recomposition through resistance training. The authors concluded that, like we know, recomposition does occur, although there are many different factors which influence the likelihood or magnitude of this occurring. I like to think of this idea on a spectrum. On one side, we have a decreased likelihood or magnitude of recomposition occurring, and on the other side of the spectrum, we have an increased likelihood or magnitude of recomposition. Essentially, a lifter who is highly trained, with a fast rate of weight loss, low body fat level, a less effective resistance training program, and a low protein intake is less likely to experience a recomposition during a deficit. On the other hand, a lifter who has less training experience, with a slower rate of weight loss, a high level of body fat, a more effective resistance training program, and a high protein intake is more likely to experience recomposition during a deficit. So with all this background information now established, the question still remains. Should you go through cyclical bulking and cutting phases, or is a gaintaining approach more appropriate? Well, the reality is that there is no correct answer for everyone. Rather, it depends on your own personal preferences. To make this decision, we will now explore both the benefits and negatives of each approach to help lifters make an informed decision. The first factor to discuss is long-term muscle growth. It is pretty clear from both the scientific research and anecdotal experience that cyclical bulking and cutting phases are going to be better for long-term muscle growth and physique development. While trainees can still achieve significant muscle growth without using this approach, the long-term results are likely to be better from dedicated bulking and cutting cycles compared with a gaintaining approach. The second factor to consider is everyday leanness. Generally, most lifting enthusiasts want to both gain muscle mass and reduce body fat. Going through bulking and cutting phases means that most of the time we will probably be in a surplus, meaning that our body fat will probably be above what we would ideally want to be. However, with a gaintaining approach, trainees can maintain a fairly lean body fat all year round, allowing them to enjoy their physique on an everyday basis, rather than only being in a lean condition for 1 or 2 months every 2 years or so. Another factor to consider is less related to physique development, but more so about strength performance. For trainees aiming to maximize strength gains or maximize performance in a competitive strength sport, bulking and cutting phases are likely to be superior. This is for a number of reasons. First, trainees may need to find what weight class they are most competitive in for their given sport. Often this involves lifters gaining weight over time, allowing them to be more competitive in a heavier weight class. So this in itself would require lifters to gain weight over time. Furthermore, trainees may need to cyclically bulk and cut to maximize muscle mass within a given weight class. This would allow them to maximize their strength potential at any given body weight. So for strength athletes in a weight-restricted sport, bulking and cutting phases are likely to be superior. Another factor to consider here is health and athleticism. Many lifting enthusiasts may also be involved in other sports or activities outside of the gym, or simply want to prioritize health and longevity. For both these outcomes, lifters are usually better off maintaining a fairly lean physique over time. This will allow us to be involved in other sports and other forms of physical activity and to ensure we are in good health, while still making decent gains in the gym. And the last factor to consider is the development of behaviors and habits. For non-competitive strength or physique athletes, the goal is generally to live a healthy and enjoyable lifestyle, and lifting should be something that adds to this, not something that detracts from it. For this whole lifting and nutrition lifestyle to be a sustainable way to live, we probably need to develop some long-term habits and behaviors which promote this. This will allow us to continue training and eating well from a long-term perspective, which is what it ultimately takes to achieve great results. However, when going through cyclical bulking and cutting phases, it provides less time to develop such behaviors and habits because we are regularly shifting our nutrition goals. A gaintaining approach, on the other hand, allows us to consistently work on our habits and behaviors over time. This doesn't mean we can't successfully build good behaviors and habits with a bulking and cutting approach, but it will be more effective with a gaintaining approach. The longer time we have to develop these habits, the more subconscious they will become. This means over time, this lifestyle will become more sustainable and less effortful, and we are more likely to be consistent for a longer duration. So to summarize this video, let's establish some practical recommendations. First, we should establish that bulking and cutting is ultimately going to be the most effective method to maximize long-term muscle growth and allow trainees to get into extremely lean conditions. Furthermore, it is probably necessary to maximize strength performance for most competitive strength athletes. However, trainees can still make great gains over time whilst at maintenance or during a deficit, but it may just be a slower rate of progress. Each approach has its own unique benefits and limitations, with each being more suitable to different people. In most cases, if you want to absolutely maximize muscle growth over time at the expense of lifestyle flexibility, everyday leanness, and general athleticism, then a bulking and cutting approach is probably for you. However, if health, lifestyle flexibility, leanness, and athleticism are important for you, then a gaintaining approach is probably more suitable. In reality, We don't actually have to choose one or the other for the rest of our lifting careers. We can implement different nutritional strategies at different points in our life. For example, a bodybuilder may go through bulking and cutting phases to maximize competition performance for their bodybuilding career. Then when they retire from competition, they may then prefer a gaintaining style approach. Or another example could be that a lifter has always focused on maintaining a lean physique, and then they decide to go through a dedicated bulking phase to try and maximize muscle growth for a given period of time. So ultimately, it comes down to many different factors and the preferences of the individual trainee. There is no better or worse method to choose, but we should always be aware of the trade-offs of each approach. So with this information, lifters can make informed decisions as to what approach they want to take at any given point in their lifting career. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.